What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about the evolution of quarterback mechanics. So we're going to be talking about some of the older school methods, comparing those to some of the newer school methods at the quarterback position when it comes to training. We're going to talk about footwork, your base, your arm slot, the more traditional over the top, and now the lower arm slot that you see a lot of quarterback coaches teaching. So I hope this is able to help you out. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to discuss, fellas, is the throwing base, which I think is the most foundational part of the throw, just simply because, like, if your throwing base is off, then I feel like everything else in terms of your throwing mechanics is going to be off. So something that a lot of older school coaches used to teach is that you want your base to be wide. You want to be sitting in the pocket. You want your feet to be just outside of your shoulders when you throw. Now, the issue with this, you guys, now the reason why coaches would teach this, and it would speed up a quarterback's release, but this would actually put a lot of unnecessary pressure on quarterback's elbow and shoulder. And again, the game evolves. You can't blame older school coaches because that's just all they knew at the time, but just you have to pay attention to the evolution of the game. So a lot of guys have this really wide stance, or used to have this really wide stance. Drew Brees is a famous one for it, right? And so the reason why they do that is because you could push off of your back foot as hard as you want, but the front foot will get down fast, right? Now, contrary to a base where your feet are close together, if you're pushing off of the back foot, your foot is going to be wide. So the concept was widen your base, and you could do the same push, and the foot gets down faster. And so the foot gets down faster, which speeds up your release and makes it quicker. Now, here's the issue, you guys. As quarterbacks, whenever we throw, we're rotational athletes. And how we generate like rotational power is hip rotation, right? It's not about pushing off of our back foot, because when we push off my back foot and my knee caves, the foot's really wide, our back hip is actually not engaged and it's almost left behind the throw. So when you throw, if you have this wide base and you film yourself throw, what happens is the foot gets down, hip's not going through, and at the release point, your elbow and shoulder are ahead of your hip. That is an insane amount of pressure on the elbow and the shoulder. Now, reason why coaches switch to a more narrow base is because when you're here, it should not be a push. We are trying to rotate. You want to take the weight on your quad and shift it to the outside part of your front quad, which causes hip rotation. It's not about the back foot. So that's not how we generate power. So what you want to think is you want to step. So the step has got to be shorter. We have to be conscious of that, but this back foot should try to stay under you. So now when I step, guess what could happen? I shift that weight and my hips rotate through, but my back hip is rotated before the elbow and before the ball, and that takes pressure off the arm and will cause more of a whipping effect with your motion to get you more power. So you just have to be more mindful of the quick step, but that's how the base has evolved over the course of time at the quarterback position. Now, fellas, before we talk about arm slots and all that good stuff in terms of evolution of quarterback play, if you're a QB watching this and you guys would like a 2-month-long training schedule that you can follow, go to that very first link in the description below where you can get our elite quarterback training package. What you'll get access to, guys, is 2 months of daily gym workouts and field workouts for quarterbacks to take their skills to the next level. So we map out every single workout, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the gym and for the field. We give you the exact sets and reps to do, and we include a video example of each gym exercise and field exercise. So guys, if you want to take your skills to the next level as a quarterback, very first link in that description below, 2 full months of training. And we also include a video on there that's 45 minutes long on how you can read defense. So we work on the physical, but also the mental aspects as well. So again, guys, very first link in that description below. Let's get back to this video. All right, fellas, so let's talk about arm slots. So this is kind of like, I guess you could say, a hotter topic nowadays in the quarterback world, is that, you know, like the more traditional, like a lot of coaches used to teach, like you want to be directly over the top because you want to have a nice high release point so the defensive line can't pop up and knock the ball down. Now, I don't think that's wrong. I think that's true. I think the higher release point does make it harder for a defensive lineman to knock the ball down, but you see a lot of guys nowadays with a much lower arm slot. Like a guy like Aaron Rodgers is about right here. You see Mahomes all the time, he's throwing about right here. So my take on the whole arm slot situation is that there are many different arm slots to play the position. I'm not a fan, and we're going to talk about what causes this, of quarterbacks being like way up here. I feel like it takes a while for you to get to something called extension. Extension is essentially how you get more accuracy on the throw and like more rotations on the ball, and it helps with velocity. When you release the ball, you want your wrist, elbow, shoulder to be extended, and that's when you flick the wrist and have your hand come all the way through. So with that being said, the argument for sidearm, right, is that if you are here when you stride, and the thing is, you got to make sure that when you go back with the ball, you're not lifting directly to 90. That's what can cause the overly high release point, because you kind of lean out of there with your head. But a lot of guys teach this here. You get to this like opposite L position, and they want you to go straight there because you get to extension faster. And I do believe that that is true. I'm just not the guy that's going to teach quarterbacks like, hey, try to always throw there. I'm not going to do that. That's not me. I would prefer probably this arm slot. I would say your elbow should be even with your shoulder and you should be at a 90, and I feel like you could still get to extension just as fast as if you're a little bit lower. Now, that has a lot to do with the backstroke of the ball. A lot of QB coaches, what they used to teach was that when you stride, you want to lift the ball directly to 90. Now, the issue is, guys, is how your rotator cuff works, how rotation works on the throw, is you generally want to rotate with your hips. When your foot gets down in your throw, the hip rotation brings the shoulders through. So it's really hard to go 90 straight around. It's like almost physically impossible. So what a lot of guys do is they go 90, and when they rotate, that ball dips behind their head to get this really high release point, and it's a long process to get to that extension. And sometimes guys lean, which can make the ball go high or make the ball go low. So what you ultimately want to shoot for is your foot gets down, and you should be in some type of backstroke position. Some guys are like really, really specific, like you need to be a super perfect L. You don't need to be a perfect L, but maybe somewhere lower, somewhere a little higher, somewhere here when the foot gets down. So when the hips rotate, that can get you to here. A lot of guys focus so much on the sidearm, but they skip the step of being here first so your hips can bring you through. So there are many arm slots. I think you should practice all of them. You should practice a higher slot throwing over somebody. You should practice a lower slot throwing around somebody, and a more traditional like 3/4 type arm slot. But that's the argument behind the two. I think the game has evolved from the way over the top release, and being a little bit more lower is totally fine to be there. Now, another thing that has changed over the years at the quarterback position is the concept of torque and upper body and lower body dissociation. So this is something that I was taught as a young quarterback, which really honestly hurt me. Like, it really, really hurt my throwing mechanics. But I used to have coaches, and I still think there are some coaches that teach this, and I hope that maybe some of them see this and have a different approach to it. But what happens is, like, this is what I was taught. I was taught that when you take a stride with your front foot, you want to open up with your front shoulder, and then you bring the ball through. Now, the reason why that's a problem is you do not produce something called torque, which comes from having your upper body go separate in the opposite direction from your lower body. So you got to think about the quarterback position as a rotational athlete. So a couple of the examples of rotational athletes are golfers and also baseball players, like when they hit the ball. So let's talk about a golf swing. That's an easy one for everybody to understand, right? So if I'm trying to hit a golf ball and trying to hit it far, am I going to be in my golf stance, and am I going to go like this and just go straight into it? No, the ball's not going to go anywhere. We're not putting. Even when you putt, you still go back with the club, right? Baseball player, if you're in the batter's box, pitcher throws you a pitch, you step to the pitcher, and your shoulder goes same time as your stride. That ain't going to go anywhere. So a lot of times, quarterback coaches don't think of a throwing motion as a rotational athlete. And rotational athletes need to develop torque. There needs to be a coil when they throw. So as a quarterback, when we throw, you don't want to open up your front shoulder. What you want to do is you want to close your front shoulder. You want to step to the target, but you want your front shoulder to slightly rotate back. So when your foot's down, that's like an anchor, right? And you should feel a little bit of a stretch right here in your throw motion. So now when your hips decide to fire through and you decide to rotate through, it's like a slingshot, like your upper body slings through. And that whipping effect is how we get more velocity on the throw. So if you got a coach that's teaching that or this, you're not getting any torque. There's no separation in your upper body and lower body. You're just pushing the ball. And you might be consistent within 5 to 8 yards, but when those throws get further and they're college level type throws, you're not going to have the velocity needed. So guys, you almost got to think opposite with your shoulders. You don't want everything to go at the target at once. You want to stay in your base, you stride, shoulder rotates back, and then the hips fire through. And that coil, I promise you, will get you more velocity on the ball, and you'll be a much more consistent passer.